Well, the US president has weighed in. Let's bring in our special guests on the panel. Adolfo Franco is a Republican strategist and previously was an advisor to Senator John McCain. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Good to have you with us. We're also joined by LaFonza Butler. She's a former senior advisor to Kamala Harris for the People, and she's currently a partner for SCRB Strategies and joins us from Los Angeles. Also in D.C., Jennifer Victor is a professor of political science at George Mason University's Schar School Policy and of Government. Thank you very much indeed, all of you, for joining us here. I understand it's very late where you are, but it has been a sleepless night for many. Let's start with you, Adolfo Franco. This is now arguably a two-horse race. This is between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. Why do you think this is? What's prompted this change in what was once a very crowded field?
Well, a couple of things, and my guest will speak to this as well, is, you know, just a few days ago, everyone was talking about the Sanders momentum and that it was unsurmountable and he was going to be the nominee. And first of all, everything can change in politics quickly and it can change again. But certainly since Saturday, there has been a political earthquake and sea change in the Democratic Party to coalesce around Joe Biden. First, it is the remarkable result of the South Carolina primary, where he won decisively. He was supposed to win South Carolina. That was his firewall, but not by 30 or 40 points. The African American vote in that state was so overwhelming that I think there was a signal to some of the other candidates that were more in what we call sometimes his lane, centrist, to say, this is the person we need to coalesce around and have as our nominee, not to have a far more left extreme. You saw in your clip here that you just ran that Mr. Sanders refers to his candidacy as a movement, our movement, not the Democratic Party, of which he's not even a member technically or has not been, but a movement. And I think that decisive win in South Carolina, we're seeing the fruits of that now. Two of the dropped out candidates, Mayor Pete Buttigieg and former candidate, but Senator Amy Klobuchar endorsed Joe Biden for the nomination. So that has been decisive. And that's what we're seeing. The Democratic establishment coalescing around their candidate, their centrist candidate, and now he has the surge and the momentum.
OK, well, let's take that argument to LaFonza Butler. Why do you think this has gone down to a two-horse race? Is this just people showing their fear of Bernie Sanders, or are they very much determined to rally around the right candidate all along, which Joe Biden argues was him? How do you see the changes in this race? How did they come to this?
Look, I think, you know, it came about in the first two contests. There's been lots of conversation in the Democratic Party about are Iowa and New Hampshire the most representative states of the Democratic Party and its base. And it wasn't really until you got to states like Nevada and South Carolina that you really got to see the fullness of the Democratic base performance. And so I think how we got here is just how Adolfo just described. The energy demonstrated in South Carolina with the endorsement of Representative Clyburn, the sort of well-known candidacy of and name ID of Vice President Biden, and a lot of luck, you know, in a lot of ways. And you know, politics is just as much about art as much art as it is science. And this pendulum could swing again. There's a lot more contests to be had. There was a time when Elizabeth Warren was up and it was hers to lose. And so we should all sort of caution ourselves and not declare Biden the Democratic nominee quite yet. But we can appreciate that he had a good night, that black voters are showing up all across the South, that former Representative Beto O'Rourke and other leaders in in Texas who have endorsed and campaigned on behalf of Vice President Biden actually mattered. We've talked about tonight how the Vice President didn't spend very much money and didn't campaign very hard in Texas, yet he's come away with a victory. And I don't think that is just because of South Carolina, but there's a lot of work that other people do when the candidate is not in those states, and I just think that should be recognized as well. Former Mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, was just there 2 days ago, and I think there is a lot of momentum moving to Vice President Biden, but I would caution us to not sort of declare him the nominee quite yet.
Well, absolutely. And let's not forget there are still an additional 2 or perhaps even 3 candidates left if we count Tulsi Gabbard's. What happens to Elizabeth Warren and Mike Bloomberg? I mean, are they going to bow out politely and leave this to the 2 men in their 70s to carry on? Or is this likely, will the pendulum swing to another candidate, do you think?
Look, the story of this election is not yet written. I think that after tonight, though I know the counting is still happening in California and in Texas as it relates to congressional level delegate allotment, I think Senator Warren and Mayor Bloomberg have some real questions to ask themselves. You know, are they continuing to add value to the discussion? In some ways, I think that they are. But are we moving towards a pathway that best unites the Democratic Party towards the general election is another question that they have to ask themselves. And there's going to be some soul searching tonight. I'm not sure who's going to move in what direction, if they're going to bow out or not. But for Senator Warren, when you come in third in your home state, there's some real questions that you got to ask yourself.
OK, well, let's take some of those questions to our third panel member, Jennifer Victor. This has effectively now narrowed down into a 2-horse race, has it not, between Joe Biden and Senator Sanders. We can't write off Senator Sanders yet. He's just picked up the biggest state, arguably, of California. So still a lot of movement between those 2 candidates. But I am interested to get your thoughts on how we got to this point. At one point, it was Senator Warren, rather, who was leading the field, who had the momentum behind her. Why do you think she's now dropped down to 3rd place in her own state? Why is America not willing to nominate a woman to become president of the United States?
Well, that question's going to remain on the table, I'm afraid, for a while. I'm not sure that we quite know who that candidate is going to be and how the country might eventually come to that. And I assume they will at some point. But it's not unusual in these primary races to have contests in which individual candidates will have a surge and then come back down. And I remember in the 2016 Republican nomination phase, each one of those candidates at some point was sort of surging. And so really what it comes down to is there's this sense of expectations that get built in for any particular candidate at any particular time. And what we've seen here tonight is that Elizabeth Warren has significantly underperformed where she was expected to, and Joe Biden has significantly overperformed where he was expected to. It's probably fair to say that Bloomberg has significantly underperformed and Sanders has underperformed in some places and done as well as expected in some others. But it's that recalibration of expectations that happens after each one of these contests. And so as this narrative then solidifies and develops over the next few days, and we wait again for the next set of contests, that's where the adjustments will be made. It's worth noting as well that some of the story that's coming out of the camps now, as it does tend to boil down, as it looks like it's going to boil down to this Sanders versus Biden case, is you're getting really different rhetoric from both of these camps. And as my colleagues were talking about earlier here, on the Bernie Sanders side, you have this sense of a movement. He doesn't even talk about it as a party, and it's a very revolutionary kind of kind of rhetoric, but it's not really clear what the boundaries of that revolution are. Is it just about policy? Is it just about healthcare and college payments and so forth? Or is it about taking down the legislative process and creating a whole new policy-making structure? And that gets kind of scary for people. That starts to sound like something that isn't the America or the democracy that we know. And so even if people agree with the goals of what Sanders might be talking about, not everybody is necessarily comfortable with his sort of scorched earth approach to politics, and that's where I think Joe Biden has been able to make gains. Joe Biden is this, people know who he is, he's got the name recognition, he's this trusted figure. They sort of know what they're getting with Joe Biden. People seem to have a hard time getting excited about him. He didn't take off right away, and he still has some downsides as a candidate, and it's not clear that he's going to overcome all of them through this. But it seems to be the safe choice that many Democrats tonight have begun to coalesce around.
OK, great to get all of your thoughts. Thank you so much to the whole panel, Adolfo Franco, LaFonza Butler and Jennifer Victor. Thank you so much.